Welcome to the show, Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. I'm your host today, Jeff Girard, along with special guest, Mr. Richard Grant. And I know there's an initial in there somewhere, right?
Lewis.
Richard Lewis Grant. Not to be confused with the other Richard Grant.
Or, yes, there must be others, right?
There must be.
There's a British actor.
There is. There's also the Swiss Richard Grant of Swiss descent. Swiss?
That's me.
That's you. Oh,
I'm
okay.
the one.
Well, that's
Yeah,
what I thought.
that's the one.
Welcome to the show, guys. We're going to talk about your retirement life, your financial life, ways you can get out of debt, manage your money, plan for your future. And my special guest today is helping us give Arif Halaby a day off today, who has been working very hard and deserves the time off. So we're happy to stand in for him. And today's topic, really, we're going to be gearing this around retirement, but I want to talk about some facts, some things to look out for, and really, I think some of the keys, because, Richard, as you well know, planning for retirement is not something that we can do overnight. Certainly you can win the lottery. Some people win the lottery, but they also have to play. With that comes a little bit of a risk, is there not?
Yeah, and their quality of life often goes down.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's been studies on that.
Yeah. So the alternative to that is to do what we call slow and steady wins the race. Building over time, putting a plan together, having a budget. These are all things that I think people are aware exist, and that those are the tried and true ways to build for a financially sound future. But I think we get caught up in some of the gimmicks and some of the things that are out there that are in our face constantly with media and advertising, and I think people are still looking for that one thing that can change their life financially. And I really think it's a set of principles that you should live by. And Richard Grant, you've written a book about those principles when it comes to money.
Power tools to slay the money dragon.
Yeah,
because there is a lot of bad information out there, or poor information, and people don't understand money, and it's like a power tool, right?
It is.
But if you use a power tool unwisely or incorrectly, you can, chop off your fingers, right? So Power Tools to Slay the Money Dragon is available on Amazon and all other places, and to help people understand those principles for safety in how they use this thing we call money.
And money comes to us in different forms. Certainly we go and trade our time for money when it comes to work, and we do that for an amount of time. But Richard, I love when you're talking about, in your book, Power Tools to Slay the Money Dragon, the storing of that energy, which is really, and I think you broke it down as the essence of money, did you not?
Right. That's how the book begins, because people think often of money as gold or silver-based money, various assets like that. But really, those are just mediums of exchange, right?
Right.
We have paper money. There's no intrinsic value. It's just paper, right? And other cultures have wampum or whatever.
Right.
So we need to think about, what's behind it? And the thing that's behind it is our labor, and we generally exchange our labor. I exchange my labor for your labor, right? So we have to understand what money is, and that is kind of a deposit place for the essence of money. Is a place to exchange my labor for your labor for my labor.
Because back in the days, that used to be called bartering, right? And we don't do that anymore.
Not a lot.
Because you can't really tax bartering, right? I can't say I gave him 3 pairs of shoes. Actually, I was going to say for your kids, but you would have had to have made 5 pairs of shoes. You'd have been a busy man making shoes for my family, and I may have given you 8 chickens or whatever the equivalent of that was. But then we determined what that value was. Now money is really the leveling ground. It's the medium between all of those things.
Sure. And how many fish do I give you for 5 pairs of shoes?
Right.
And the fish are not going to be good. What is it? Fish and company go bad after 3 days.
I think it's 3 days. Yeah. Some would say 2, but that's another story. So let's talk about some of the ways money comes back to us, Richard. And when we're talking about retirement, really, I think the key, again, is to know that we're building multiple layers of income, or we should be building multiple layers of income for our retirement. And I think even before that, I want to predicate retirement as not a place that we get to and we just now stop working and we sit down and rock in our chairs. and wait for the checks to roll in. I mean, retirement is not what it used to be. Now, maybe for my great-grandparents and my grandparents, that was kind of the key. That was the case. They worked for a company. My great-grandfather, he was big in the hotel industry, part of, Teamsters and a lot of, union involvement.
His last name was Hilton, right?
I don't know. It was not Hilton, no. No, sadly, no. I don't know, maybe sadly or not, but certainly not the same amount of wealth. But in any case, I as a child, I thought, gosh, I've only known my great grandparents to be retired, and they were retired a long time. And even for them that passed in their mid 80s, they retired so early on, and I mean, I think back to those days where you didn't see, at least I didn't see, it wasn't on my frontal lobe to notice that there were older people that should be retired still working. I didn't see a lot of that. And so now, fast forward into my, entering my 40s now, the commonplace thing that you see is more and more people are working, and they're not really fully retiring, taking a pension, the gold watch, Social Security, which we're going to talk about today. All of those things have to materialize in a way, but that planning part can sometimes be 25, 35, 40 years, but you may live that long in retirement, we're finding.
Right. And right now, in our current situation, we have not experienced high levels of inflation. But if you go back into the 70s, 80s, there were some times where inflation was huge and eating up those fixed incomes. So your purchasing power was drastically reduced by inflation. And so you might have had people in the golden years, if you will, in the autumn of their life, having to go back because there was just go back to work because there was just too much month at the end of the money.
Right, and I love how you coined that, autumn of their life. That was so nice of you to say. So kind.
It's where the leaves are falling off the tree.
Changing colors a little bit.
There you go.
So
losing your
I'm getting there.
Memory.
I'm getting there. So when we're talking about these things, let's start talking about some of the pieces, if you will, some of the legs of the stool. Because if you remember this, maybe you've heard this. We've talked about this in the past. The four-legged stool. I think it's now become three, but it used to be. Social Security was one of those legs, and that was really developed a long time ago as a foundation to keep people off the streets. Basically, it's one of the entitlements out there that people talk about, and it's raised a lot of eyebrows lately in all of the political debates. And depending on where you stand on that spectrum, you have either a really heavy bleeding heart for Social Security, or you're saying, who's going to really count on this anyway? So, but nonetheless, it still remains one of the pieces. So you can couple that with maybe some retirement savings. Maybe you had a 401k or some type of IRA vehicle throughout your life that you were saving in. And maybe you even had a pension. Some people are still fortunate enough to have a pension that comes from their employer. And then they may have some other outside investments. So there were, I think those four are pretty healthy. And we've always talked about this. You've heard Arif say this. You've heard us talk about this on previous shows where we talk about the different layers that you should have of income, building multiple layers, multiple income streams. Those are all super important because let's say if you have a pension that goes sideways, and look, we've seen this with a major airline, and you've seen other private corporations that, some crazy stuff happened and those pensions went away. Or they were drastically reduced. We saw one that was reduced by 60%. You built your life around 100% of that fixed income coming in, and it was just reduced like that. So the unions negotiated. They said, okay, you can either have 100% of nothing, or you can have 40% of what you had yesterday. And hopefully you didn't back your entire life into that 100% of that paycheck.
And fewer companies are offering actual pension kind of things because they then are responsible for that.
That's right.
They instead turning it over to the employees to manage, quote unquote, and they usually have a 401k or some instrument where the employee contributes and possibly the company contributes too, but they're not on the hook, if you will. The company is not on the hook.
Correct. And think about that. Richard, you brought up something interesting. the pension system, what does exist of it, we're seeing more and more companies offering buyouts. So you can basically say, look, I'll take the pension which is basically an annuity. We've talked about this. A pension is you go to work, your employer puts money in, and at the end of your career there, you retire at a certain age, and they factor it in off of your age, how many years of service, and your salary, basically. So those three factors there. Maybe a couple other things, but that's generally speaking the easiest way to compute it. And then they say, we're going to pay you for not coming to work tomorrow for the rest of your life. Now you can say, look, I'll take the maximum you'll give me. Maybe it's $3,500 a month. Maybe it's $4,000 a month to never show up here ever again. Boy, it makes me feel like they didn't want me here anymore. Or I can say, and then when I die, that money goes away. They no longer make any more payments. Now, if I live a year, 5 years, 10 years, that'll kind of determine how much money I got out of that. But once I die, poof, the payments go away. Or I can say, I'm going to take less of a payment. Don't pay me $4,000. Pay me $3,000, and then make sure that my spouse gets some of the money in the form of a monthly check for the rest of her life once I pass away. So you can kind of start to see there's some different things there. But as life expectancies have gone up, now I think we just extended, not we as though we did it, but the life expectancy tables have increased by, it's 3 point something, it's almost 4 years people are living longer on average. And that's just the average. Some people are living much longer than that. So what we're starting to see is companies saying, wow, we're scratching our heads going, we have a lot of liability on the hook each and every month for an undetermined amount of time. So we're going to say, here, let's just offer this person a payout. Here's $250,000, here's $500,000, and that's more money than a lot of people have ever seen in their lives. And it comes to them in the form of a check.
And they don't realize that's going to have to last.
Correct.
And then they have to manage it, and they can lose it.
That's right.
Actually, you mentioned Lotto winners. Oftentimes, Lotto winners don't manage the windfall that they've received.
Sure.
Because they just think it's an unlimited supply of money, and it's not.
Yeah.
And they lose their money, they lose their friends, they lose you know, a lot of things.
Yeah, and considering the average inheritance is lost in about, 8 months, I think, is what I've read. 8 months to go from wealthy. I know, gosh, I have probably countless stories. I don't know that we have enough time on this show, but it wouldn't be very encouraging. I know someone that's been a millionaire twice and lost it twice and never, I think she's waiting on her third time to be a millionaire. And we have Lotto clients, Lotto winners as clients. And they've taken the annuity side of it where they said, look, pay me X amount of dollars for the next 25 or 30 years. I think it's on average 25 years for a lottery payout. But that means that no matter how bad they mess up, whether it's the money they make at their job or, you know what, I didn't do this right, or gosh, I lost some money over here. They know that they have that guaranteed amount of money coming in each and every year. And I'll tell you, that money, they count on it. Even though they didn't have it the year prior or 5 years ago, that money is now counted on. And they go and they do smart things with it. Now that they're our clients.
That's the smartest thing they've done, right?
One of them. But to say that money's just coming in and they're going to just let it go out the back door, that's not a very wise thing to do. This is an opportunity to make a difference in your life. They set up accounts where you can put money into retirement accounts each and every year. They use those monies that come to them and put them into retirement vehicles. So they have money coming in, and instead of squandering it away or spending it, they put it back into, instead of their right pocket and spending it, they put it in their left pocket for the future. So those are all things that I think people need to really take heed to, because thinking that money is just going to go and come back and go and come back, you're going to be like my friend that's been a millionaire twice and is not currently on the millionaire list. Didn't make Forbes this year. I don't know if you know that. So.
Well, you know, I have that's one of the principles that I talk about in Power Tools to Slay the Money Dragon, is to pay yourself every payday, because you have that money coming in as your salary, your pay, but all of that should not be spent right now, because you will have a period of time where you cannot work anymore. You will not be working anymore, but you still need to have funds, right, to support yourself. So in the same vein, you know, keeping track of how much you're setting aside is something people, you know, they get carried away, and the kids need whatever, summer camp and new shoes and private education, whatever, college, and all of a sudden the money's gone, and also debt, you know.
Sure.
So I suppose that's one of those one of those legs of the stool. Right?
Yes. And where do you start when you have conversations, and especially in your book, what percentage do you think is a good percentage of someone's income that they should be socking away?
Well, the general number I use in my book, in the pay yourself every payday idea, is 10%.
Okay.
That's not a magic number, but it is an easy number to calculate.
Sure.
So
1/10 of their wealth. Yeah.
Just put that aside and don't touch it. It starts growing. Don't even think about touching it. It's not there once you put that aside. There are other things that one needs to do. Live on less than you earn.
Yes.
And also, depending on debt, if you have a lot of debt, you need to focus on getting rid of that, because that costs you.
Yes.
I wish our government was a little bit more on tune with how much debt costs. But
yes.
so that number is not set in stone. But I use that as a beginning point.
Well, 10%, I think that's a great number, because it starts to train us in paying ourselves. It starts to train us to treat it like an expense. Now, that 10% doesn't have to go all towards retirement, doesn't have to go all towards your emergency account. And in fact, we've talked about having multiple breakdowns within that 10%. And we're going to take a break here in just a minute, but I want to finish this thought before we go to break. 10%, you may say, look, I make $50,000 in a year. I'm going to take $5,000. Well, that's kind of that's a big number, 5,000, to try to sock that away and reach that number overnight. Well, you may say, look, I take that number and I back into how many paychecks I have. And that means that I'm going to live on 90% of my income. Well, even at that point, the 90%, you saved for retirement or emergencies, whatever it is, and we're going to break that down. I think we'll do that when we come back from the break. But living on 90%, now you're still living at your means. And I think the key to becoming wealthy, as your book states and as we've professed, is living below your means.
Right, and I would actually go not 90%, but 70%.
Okay.
And there's that.
That's where I was hoping you'd touch on that.
Right,
'cause you have an even lower number to live on.
Right, to what you actually consume.
Okay.
And then what you do with that remainder is how you set yourself up for the future.
Great. I think we're going to take a quick break right there. When we come back, I want to talk about that. And let's break down the 30% and what we can do with that. And then let's also get into some of the retirement income strategies and some of the other keys when it comes to setting up your retirement life. I'm Jeff Girard. This is Richard Grant. This is Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour on your hometown station. This is AM 1220 KHTS.